What's going on, hockey friends? We are back, and today I want to talk about the Vegas Golden Knights, who in my eyes are coming off a disappointing season. Now, it's not as disappointing as Toronto or Pittsburgh or Colorado, but nonetheless, in my eyes, this season was a failure for them. Because they have a great team in all three areas of their roster. They have two really good goaltenders, a really good D-core with Theodore and Pietrangelo, and the forward core with Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith, and William Karlsson. Is a really good forward core, and though I was never on record saying it, Vegas were actually my pick to win the Stanley Cup. And they got to the conference finals again, but those pesky, annoying Montreal Canadiens knocked them out in 6 games, and in my eyes, Vegas didn't really have a chance in the end. So, what happened? Now, before I get into what went wrong, I'm by no means saying the Vegas Golden Knights are a failed expansion franchise. Far from it. They've made the playoffs every season since they came into the league. They've been to the conference final 3 times and made the cup final once. So this is clearly a very good team and well-run organization. And I think they will still be competitive for years to come. But in the series against the Habs, it was quite easy to see what was missing. And it was the lack of forward scoring. Vegas scored 13 goals in the series against the Habs, and 8 of those goals were scored by defensemen. Alex Pietrangelo scored 3 goals, while their captain, Mark Stone, had 0 goals and 0 points. I mean, that's just not good enough, and it became quite obvious what this team is missing. Because when you rely on Chandler Stevenson to be your number 1 center, you're asking for trouble. Yeah, I understand he's been pretty good for Vegas and he does the job defensively and he's a good producer, but to me, the one obvious thing for Vegas is to get that true number 1 dynamic center, and I will get to that later because we need to talk about Mark Stone. An incredible player. He finished 3rd in the Selke vote and 9th in the Hart vote, so he's obviously a very, very important part of this team and a very, very good player. But as the captain, where was he the entire series against the Habs? Was he even playing? I mean, he didn't do anything, and a lot of credit of course goes to the Montreal Canadiens for shutting him down, but as one of the elite wingers in the league, on one of the best teams in the league, you still have to be able to produce something and lead your team. The thing with Vegas is that they have all of these great wingers in Max Pacioretty, Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, and Mark Stone, who I just talked about obviously, and these great defensemen in Alex Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore, and Alec Martinez. But when you look at their center depth, they have William Karlsson and that's it. Like I said, Chandler Stevenson is pretty good, but he's not a number 1 center, and as much as I like him, William Karlsson isn't a number 1 center either, so it's pretty easy to see where Vegas need to improve. So I'll just jump straight into it. Jack Eichel. He's my solution. Now I'm turning into Eichel man here as much as I've talked about him on the channel, but he's such an interesting player and his future is quite unpredictable. And when I talk about Jack Eichel, I talk about the healthy Jack Eichel, because Lord knows what's going to happen with his neck surgery and all of that, and if any team even wants to take a gamble on him, but a healthy Jack Eichel is one of the best centers in the league and one of my favorite players to watch. How would Vegas acquire him? I have no idea. Their cap situation is looking pretty good. The only big question mark is if they re-sign Alec Martinez. You still have to re-sign Thomas Nosek and Matthias Janmark, but I think they will let them go. So Alec Martinez is the big one they have to re-sign. And that's what I think a potential Eichel deal could depend on. Because I'm guessing Martinez will get around 5 million, and that would leave Vegas with just 1 million in cap space. And Eichel, as we know, is on $10 million. Now, obviously a potential trade would of course include someone from this roster, and that would clear up some cap space, but what I'm about to say is probably blasphemy, but you would maybe have to trade Marc-Andre Fleury. I know, it sounds crazy because he's so loved in Vegas and I think he wants to retire there, but that $7 million cap hit is just too much. You already have Leonard for another 4 years and he's a very, very capable goalie, and he's 7 years younger, so he is the future, and I'm not waiting for Fleury's contract to end next year to lose that cap hit if I'm going after Jack Eichel, because by next year he'll probably already be gone. Now, obviously a deal for Eichel would cost more than just Fleury, and he's got a 10-team no-trade list, which more than likely has Buffalo on it. But some other pieces you could add are Alex Tuch, Riley Smith, Alec Martinez if you sign him, Chandler Stevenson, and Jonathan Marchessault, and these guys would clear up the cap space for Eichel. And then you have to add draft picks and prospects from a pretty decent prospect pool. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's pretty good. And the big one here is obviously Peyton Krebs, who you would have to give up. But also someone like Cody Glass, who I think we've all kind of overrated. I know I have at least, but he's still young and he is very talented. But with that said, and the potential pieces I've mentioned here, and I have to say you don't have to trade every guy I mentioned. You can kind of play around with them and see if you can keep one or two of them. And you could always try and get a three-way deal if you're trading Fleury, because I don't think he wants to go to Buffalo. But do I think this deal would go through with these guys I've mentioned and all of that? I don't think so. Yeah, Buffalo, they don't have that much leverage here, and they get players that can have an impact right now in potentially Riley Smith and Chandler Stevenson or maybe Alec Martinez. But I mean, come on, those players for Jack Eichel would never happen. Adding a late first rounder doesn't really add too much value, and the prospects are good, but I think Buffalo fans are sick of the word prospect because that's all they've heard over the past 5 years. So an Eichel deal would obviously be very tough to make. I know, expert analysis here. And even though he's my pick as their first line center, I don't think he ends up in Vegas, but crazier things have happened. And speaking of crazy things happening, yes, Evgeny Kuznetsov, the chaos option. Now, this could be a disaster waiting to happen, all off-ice things considered, but on-ice Kuznetsov, which I want to try and focus on, would be a good addition. He's 29 years old and has a $2 million cheaper cap hit than Eichel and is coming off a pretty, let's be nice here, a pretty meh season, but this guy can play hockey very, very well. And who knows, getting a fresh start in Vegas may be the best thing for him after his two last underwhelming seasons. Now, this could be a complete train wreck considering the things he got suspended for. Vegas, out of all places in the world, probably isn't the best place to avoid that or any mischief in general, but if they can get him to focus on his hockey and do it well, it could be a very good deal, and it wouldn't cost as much as an Eichel trade would. You'd have to give up at least a first rounder, a prospect or two like Krebs or Cody Glass or both, and a roster player like, again, maybe Riley Smith or William Karlsson to fill that center gap for Washington, but that would cause a problem for Vegas because then you have no second line center, and again, I don't think Chandler Stevenson can fill that hole as a top 6 center. But you won't have to give up as much as you would for Eichel, and with the antics Kuznetsov been up to, and with all these reports about him and how the Caps are sick and tired of him and how they want to trade him, his stock is pretty low right now and it's a high risk, high reward kind of deal. Because Kuznetsov should have won the Conn Smythe in 2018. I mean, he's that good, and when he's at his best, and if you can extract that while keeping him in check, I think it's worth it. So it's a tricky situation for Vegas, but they need to get that number 1 center if they want to go all the way, because their defense is really good, their goalie situation is really good with Fleury winning the Vezina Trophy and Leonard being here for the future, and with Mark Stone being the captain and one of the best wingers in the league, you have to think that this team will be competitive for years to come, and adding that center would probably make them the favorites for me again. So what do you guys think? If you're the Vegas GM, do you go after number 1 center or just keep the team as is and focus on keeping Alec Martinez and maybe do something during the season at the trade deadline or something? Talk to me in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.